This is ThriveCasters.
Thriving, not surviving.
Tackling youth issues that matter to you.
Welcome to this week's episode of ThriveCasters, where we will be discussing trauma in the law. I'm your host today, Waseelah, and with me I have Marie-Claire O'Brien, who is the founder and CEO of the New Life Initiative. So hi, and thank you for being with us. So we want to understand more about how the legal system can traumatise perpetrators, victims and their families. Considering that perpetrators of crime are more likely to have experienced adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, that we've spoken a lot about in other podcasts, we want to discuss if the system should consider someone's previous traumas when examining their case. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, Marie? And so how are you involved in trauma within the law?
I founded and set up my organisation, which is a community interest company. We're a non-profit and we support people with convictions to basically deal with any complex issues that they may have, and eventually, hopefully get them into education, training and work. Probably due to my own experience many years ago. So I came out of prison roughly 13 years ago. And it just really opened my eyes, the things that really go on behind those gates and those walls, and some of the people have to overcome in order to progress in life and be where we want them to be, which is pro-social members of society. And I think just my own experiences show me that it's just not that easy for some people. But yeah, the work that I do, I love to do, and we're very good at it. I only employ people with lived experience of the system, and I think that's because it really helps with the engagement and helps people on their journey.
So you're running what sounds like a very, very innovative initiative. Could you tell us a little bit more about what the New Leaf Initiative does?
Mentoring organisations, so people that have got the lived experience and the lived expertise, as well as professional qualifications such as information, advice and guidance qualifications, mentoring qualifications, and everything in between. We employ them and give them volunteering opportunities to engage with people that are either in prison. Some of the people that we've worked with have been out for many years and still haven't managed to rejoin and resettle properly back into society. So we support them at any stage in their journey, really. Sometimes they may approach us with substance misuse issues, and they've got no issues or very few issues.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we really offer person-centred support to each individual. We've supported almost 600 people, men, women and youth, who are either in prison or out in the community. And of those, around 78% educational training, and about 40% of our community we've managed to find and help them enter into the workforce. So some really good outcomes, especially when you consider that we're quite unlike other organisations who tend to cream off the top. It's kind of a term that's used in the people that are always going to be okay, if you like, and we don't do that. We'll support anybody, whether they're sex offences down to your more sort of petty offences and everything in between.
That's amazing. So you have a lot of experience dealing with the law and dealing with people and engaging with people who have had different experiences in the law. So can you tell us a little bit more about how trauma can affect people when they're going through the justice system?
Yeah, so I think I've been pondering this question all day, knowing that this podcast was coming up, and I think it affects people in two ways, both directly and sort of indirectly. To give you a personal example, there was a gentleman that we supported who was in his 50s, who'd served a very long sentence for double murder, and he had a childhood that was full of alcoholism from his parents. Just to give you an insight into how bad that was for him, the dogs, when his parents were fighting, the dogs used to defecate in the room. It was quite a traumatic environment by the sounds of it. So he had that at home, because they knew he came from a vulnerable family that weren't able to provide the support that he needed. So he had no safe space to go other than nature. But those significant childhood experiences led to him becoming an alcoholic himself through, that pattern of behaviour that we know sometimes emerges, and unfortunately committing his index offences, which were very serious and which he served a long time for. One of the things that really stuck, which he spoke to me about in depth, was because of the sexual abuse that he suffered as a child. It was very triggering for him when he went to prison. The one thing that he said was the smell of other men, the musty smell of men, used to send abusers, and because of his offences and the seriousness, he also had to take part in therapeutic communities, which saw him sat next to people who were quite serious sex offenders. So quite a few triggers around that for him. So there's that triggering kind of effect of whatever you've experienced that's potentially led you to offend. There's obviously the relationship element as well, both from your offending and from the impact of being separated from your family. So especially for women, there aren't as many female prisons as there are male prisons. So women tend to be sent further away from their loved ones, especially their children. And most women in prison have childcare responsibilities, so it's kind of doubly traumatic, both for the mother and for the children. So going back to the direct kind of trauma as well, you've got things from stop and searches and how traumatic they can be, especially for example, recently brought to light and recently more spoken about, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the fact that black men are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched than their white counterparts. The racial disparity once you're in prison, and the sentencing impact in relation to colour and ethnicity. You've got other direct traumatic experience such as corruption and bullying. So, especially in male prisons, I'd say there's a big issue in terms of violence, and then that leading to self-harm and mental health issues and drug addictions. And also, even at the sentencing point, receiving an unfair or an unjust sentence can be really traumatic. People being sentenced if they're innocent of their offence, or being sentenced extra harshly because of the colour of their skin or whatever exacerbating features there are.
So you've mentioned a lot of different aspects of the whole legal system and the whole process of incarceration, or even stop and search even before you get there. So is there an awareness, do you know of, that within any of the practitioners or any of the institutions or the system, that this stuff is traumatizing?
I think it's been spoken about more because there's so much research now on it, and we are just becoming more aware of the impact of childhood trauma on behaviour, for example, and mental health issues on behaviour, and learning disabilities on behaviour. So I think it's there. I don't think it's enough yet. One of the somebody just recently was telling me about, they had some judges in a room, and a lady was doing some sort of talk to them. It was actually a governor of a prison that told me this, and the lady was kind of presenting to them, and the judge that had sentenced her was in the room, and she kind of challenged him in a positive way around, if you'd known what you know about me now, do you think you would have sentenced me the same? What were you hoping to achieve by taking me away from my children? And not in a blaming way, but just in a real discussion point. And he apparently was really embarrassed and said, I honestly didn't think about the impact. I just had a job to do, and it was that kind of clinical decision making, process driven thing for him. And it was only by having that amazing interaction with one of the people that he'd sentenced that he had a light bulb moment. And I think that's really important, that we're in the right rooms having the right discussions. And there's a lot of great judges out there, there's a lot of great solicitors, there's a lot of great prison governors and prison staff that are trained now in trauma-informed approaches, but there's not enough. We train prison officers, for example, for less time than we would train a hairdresser, and they're dealing with it's really crazy, and we pay them less than we pay somebody in Tesco's. So there's so much I think that needs to be addressed, especially when you think that these people are supporting and punishing the most damaged members of society potentially need the most help.
So I think, so as you said, like these people are the most vulnerable and the most damaged of our communities. So some people would say, and as we notice our societies are becoming more and more polar, and we like to vilify people so much more than we used to. So some people would say that that our prisoners are not deserving of any kind of mercy or kindness, or that there should be an awareness of their trauma because they're just criminals. So like one of our questions that we were thinking about is like, why should a judge actually care about the individual and what they've been through and what they're going to go through when they end up in the system? Why should they care? What are the biggest implications of that?
I think I get that kind of viewpoint because I think I had a more simplistic viewpoint, not necessarily that harsh, but I definitely looked at things a lot more black and white than I do now. Why should judges care? They should care because it causes offending, it triggers re-offending, and if we're not dealing with the complex issues that some or most prisoners kind of exhibit, if we're not helping them to deal with their trauma, then what do we expect? It's almost kind of it's that kind of vicious cycle, isn't it? Nothing ever changes. Most of the people in prison have been in multiple times, and I think we need to, for example, if we know that a lot of crime is driven through substance misuse and addiction, why hasn't every prison got a therapeutic wing inside it? Why hasn't every prison got, a wing that deals with trauma, separate to the drug addiction? And that was part of my journey, really. My own sort of triggers for my offence was bereavement, losing my father. I went from being a very successful estate agent and mortgage advisor in financial services. I was kind of one of the Joe Public, if you like. I could be one of the judge's daughters or whoever.
Yeah.
And I kind of went from being that overachiever to being a troubled, traumatised, damaged young woman who then went on to live a chaotic life for a few years and caused harm to others. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Hurt people, and then healed people kind of help to stop that pattern of behaviour. So my own journey when I got into custody was almost very similar to a lot of prisoners. I nearly picked up heroin to deal with my issues. It was kind of self-medication. That was the life that I was living at the time. And it was only because I managed to tap into the WRAPT program, which was a therapeutic community where you were segregated away from the main population to receive like in-depth counselling every day, and peer support from supportive other prisoners. It was just a really impactful healing time for me, those 4 months, and it really did. I think it set me up for where I am today, if I'm honest with you, and that was sort of 13, 14 years ago. So having experienced that, I'm just a massive advocate for helping people to deal with the trauma. Otherwise, what do we expect? And as well, when you consider that a large proportion, especially of the youth justice system, is made up of care leavers, for example, children that have been let down, time and again, either by their families or by the state, then we have a responsibility to help people.
So from what it is that you're saying, that so if we are traumatized and if the system creates more trauma, then we're only going to end up being in the system and going round and round in circles, and we're not actually going to improve. So if we're just thinking about current events, so if judges were more compassionate and if the system offered things like therapy, do you think that there would therefore be a decline in the number of reoffendings, but also as families? Because as we know from ACEs, that somebody going to prison within the family is considered a traumatic experience enough that it would be considered an adverse childhood experience. So do you think that from one judge or a few judges being more compassionate, that actually we could change so much more and it would be generations that would be impacted?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? More children are affected by parental imprisonment than are affected by divorce. It's a startling statistic. But I think even if you move away from the word compassion, which kind of scares a lot of people that are there to uphold the law, I think there's the argument, and that's the utopian dream, is that we want people to be more compassionate, more empathetic, and more understanding of everything that we've spoken about. But I also think there's an economic argument. You know, we know that it costs kind of, I think reoffending costs around £18 billion a year. And it's not working. If hospitals were kind of churning out people that were still sick, we would close them down. And so I don't really understand how the criminal justice system can survive with the outputs that it's currently generating. I think there's a compassionate argument, but I also think, you know, if people aren't ready for the talk about let's be more compassionate, we should focus on the economic effects of we can't afford to keep running things the way that we are. And then also I think that we should look at the Scandinavian models, which are really successful, and how they work, and kind of emulate those models so that we have less reoffending and it costs less, and the impact on families is less as well.
Can you expand a little bit more on what the Scandinavian model is?
I mean, it's quite varied, and there's all sorts of arguments as to why it wouldn't work here. So Scandinavian countries typically pay a lot higher rates of tax, so they have a lot more money to kind of invest in preventative stuff, as opposed to treating it as it pops up. But in essence, it's just a lot more rehabilitative. It's a lot more forward thinking and innovative. So, for example, prisoners in I think in the Swedish prisons have a mobile phone in their cell, and it's kind of, you know, the risk is managed. So I think only certain numbers can call in, but they can do a lot more around their own resettlement. They're empowered to take charge of communications with their families. Family ties are really nurtured, and they have, you know, conjugal visits and things. And I know that's quite far out for this country and maybe a few listeners, but they do these things, and their reoffending rates, I believe, are in the 20 something percent, as opposed to our reoffending rates, which range from 46 up to sort of 60-70%. When you compare that and the economic benefit of doing it a different way, I just don't see how you could argue against being more innovative. For me, it's just a no-brainer.
So if there were just, say, 5 things that desperately need to be changed about the system right now, what would you say that they are?
The 5 things that I would change would be engagement with the police. The police are kind of becoming more innovative anyway. I've definitely felt a change over the past few, I'd say, couple of years, in terms of the preventative work that they do. So whereas before they were there to bang people up and, you know, didn't really care about any of, so say for example they're rearresting somebody time and time again, there was no kind of intervention there, and I think that's to be applauded, especially with the West Midlands Police, that they do a lot more preventative stuff and a lot more hands-on work. So we've had the police actually bring people to our office for us to support them holistically, which is just fantastic. It must be fantastic for them as well to kind of have that element to their job, rather than it just being punitive. I would definitely look at the sentencing, and, you know, we know that community sentences are a lot more effective, especially with women. There's a really amazing female service in Birmingham called Anawim, who are very supportive, very holistic, and I think we need more sort of community interventions available for people, rather than just shipping them off to prison. I also think, as I've already touched on, that once they're in prison, it should be a lot more therapeutic and address a lot of the trauma that they're probably carrying along with them, or that even they're offending. You know, causing harm to people is in itself traumatic. I can vouch for that. So, you know, helping people to deal with whatever burdens they're carrying, because guilt is a useless emotion, and if we can turn that pain into purpose, you might get more people like myself, not that I'm holding myself up as a, you know, an angel, but people that are just really wanting to give back and be passionate about social justice and to give platforms to other people who are underrepresented. So yeah, I think that was three things, but I think as well having the discussion with the judges and with the people who are in those positions of power, inviting them into our forums, but more importantly, encouraging them to invite us into their arenas. Yeah, I think that's really important.
So we've been talking a lot about the actual system itself and prisons themselves. So the trauma and the law and prisons affect more people than just the people in the prisons themselves. They also affect the families and the wider communities. So how do you think trauma of either going to prison or the wider system affects families? So the people that are left behind?
Yeah, so we've done a fair bit of work on this actually. We're very blessed to have just won some funding from Barrow Cadbury. So HMP Birmingham is a notoriously difficult prison. It's been through a lot of issues over the past sort of couple of years. Although now it has a really great management team, you know, kind of changing things and changing the culture and really embedding some positive practice. But we did a consultation there with around 200, I think it was 258 visitors to HMP Birmingham about their experiences and what were the issues, what could we support them to change, because I think that's really important as well, that we speak to the communities in question and allow them to come up with the solutions and be part of that, co-produce solutions together. And their experiences were just quite shocking. This was kind of 2 years ago, down to, you know, from being assumed to be guilty just because their loved one was in prison, to the cleanliness of, you know, the places that they were visiting and that their children were subjected to the lack of searches and the overzealous searches, you know, prison officers losing documentation of visitors, and just of the cost, even just the cost kind of being really exclusive to some family members who lived further away, prohibitive costs, and then obviously having to support your loved one whilst they're in prison, you know, sending money in for them to spend on their necessities. So yeah, there was a lot of things that were flagged up for me. It was really enlightening actually, because obviously my perspective had always been as the prisoner, as the ex-prisoner, and that was my kind of knowledge, if you like. So having those conversations with loved ones who were going through it and were really eager to talk and share their experiences and solutions to that, it was really powerful and really emotional to me to know what my own family and friends had gone through, because not only are loved ones going through those experiences, they're also protecting their loved ones. So yeah, it was a real eye opener. I think COVID-19 has brought its own set of issues, especially in relation to families. We all know that, you know, we've experienced a lockdown, a worldwide lockdown. Prison visits kind of stopped on the 24th of March. And it's only been literally in the past few weeks that a few loved ones have managed to get back in and see their loved ones. And you've got to think of all that time that young children, older children, people in relationships have gone without being able to connect visually with their loved ones, worrying about their health and safety, and also the impact on children and things like that. So it's been a really difficult, horrendous time for families, especially during COVID. And the prisons have dealt, you know, I actually think the prisons have dealt with it really well. We've had low numbers of deaths and everything's been really well contained. So, you know, we can applaud HMPPS, because I kind of feel like they were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. You know, there was no easy answer. But I just think, yeah, we need to kind of reflect on how difficult it's been for families that haven't had the pleasure of connecting with their loved ones.
So, considering both sides of this, as being a prisoner or outside of the prisoner, and families and all of the things related to this, so as young people, like some of our listeners could be young offenders or people who know people who are, how do we better educate ourselves and the people around us about how dynamic these issues are and just how varied they are?
But again, I think it starts with the discussion, doesn't it? I mean, it's really maybe because I did the therapy in custody myself. It kind of shone a light on how these triggers happen and manifest in negative behaviours, and it was a really wonderful learning experience about myself. So I think that's the thing is if people are experiencing issues, if people are causing damage to their loved ones through their behaviours, to really to reflect on that, to reflect on maybe why that's happening, not in a blaming way, but in a just in a I want to change things kind of way, and to educate themselves. And for me, again, in custody, it was reading books from people that had been through similar experiences, real life biographies of people that had experienced significant trauma, far worse than anything that I'd been through, far worse. And just kind of learning from them. So I think that lived experience model, I'm obviously passionate about it because it's what my business is built on, but ultimately we know that it's a really powerful mechanism. So potentially to reach out to organisations like mine who are just like them but a bit further on, and allow us to kind of support them to access the right support, to access counselling, to maybe support their families, because quite often crime, especially youth crime, it's just divisive in every sense of the word. So to just allow people to come in, and I know that there's a lot of disenfranchisement with the system. The system is kind of to blame for a lot of the issues that people experience, but we're not in the system. We're aware of it and we work within it to support people, like ourselves and like our peers, but we're not actually answerable. We're not like probation. We're not like the prison service. We're kind of independent enough to be able to provide real holistic person-centred support. And there's lots of organisations like mine. I've had the pleasure of meeting a good few through the PCC and the good work that they do. So yeah, just to kind of know that we're out there and that we want to support, and that we want to support you to get a platform to sort of vocalise what you think the solutions are. We don't know all the answers, but you might know, the listeners might know some answers and might be just, they've got skills, these kids and these young people and these even adults, and a lot of them are transferable skills, and I think that we can help to kind of shift away from the traumatic, the darkness, all that kind of traumatic life that I led myself, and that a lot of people are leading, especially these days, towards a more pro-social, positive, contributing way of life. You've got a voice and people want to hear it, so reach out for support and let organisations like ours do that for you and with you.
So something that we've spoken about a lot on ThriveCasters is just our general distrust towards the police as young people. So as you said, stop and search is really, really high amongst BME communities. And so where I sit as a Muslim woman, I've grown up in a post 9/11 world where I'm continuously targeted and continuously stereotyped. So it's rather difficult to hear the notion that maybe that there are parts of the actual system that are trying to benefit us and that are trying to help us, when on the face of it, judges are just increasing our trauma, the prison system is increasing trauma, and so on. So what would you say to young people who are skeptical of the police, skeptical of the system, and don't believe that there is a way that any of this could be positive? What would you say to those young people?
Firstly, I get it. I get it. I haven't necessarily experienced it myself as a white woman that's reasonably educated, but my close friends, my staff members, their partners, even just recently were subjected to a random an inappropriate stop and search. It's something that I've known was going on since I was in my late teens, when a black friend of mine turned up defeated, and you know, when I asked him what the problem was, it was like, oh, I've been stopped and searched again. We went out that night and we were stopped and searched together in his car because he drove a nice car. So I do think I'm passionate about BLM and you know, changing things, because I see what's going on with my black and Asian and, you know, other ethnicities friends and stuff. So I get it, but I also believe, as an ex-prisoner kind of working within the criminal justice system, that it's difficult to change things from the outside and just sitting there kind of bitching about it. I think we need to be more solution focused with that than that. I think we need to be more organised and more strategic than that. So yeah, for me, it's a difficult argument. It's like, because we do work within prisons, for example, and it's sometimes you can feel like you're part of that system that's oppressing people. I've had keys to prisons, and it was a real reflection for me around, God, you know, the keys were so symbolic of my own kind of prison sentence, and does that change me then? Does that make me more like an officer than an ex-prisoner? And I had that conversation with some prisoners, particularly a black prisoner that I was supporting at the time. And I was like, you know, does this make me more like them than you? And he was like, no, it's really good for us to see you with that, because it shows us how far we can go. And I think, you know, for example, with the PCC, encouraging and creating platforms for young people that don't necessarily conform to, you know, what society sees as a professional young person. They're kind of a bit more street. I would say I'm quite street at times. I've lived that life. I was a lap dancer for years. I'm kind of streetwise. But I think the world is opening up to us, both academia, you know, there's a lot more lived experience in academia. Learning is becoming a lot more inclusive. I think that even down to kind of board members, you know, charities, for example, have boards of trustees, and I think there's even a change there in decision makers, becoming more inclusive of people with the lived experience having a voice on boards and in the rooms around the tables of decision makers. So I would say don't let fear of the system stop you from knowing that you can make an impact, a positive impact. I think you need to be at the table, regardless of what your opinion is. I think that healthy challenge and constructive criticism has never been more needed and more valued than it is at the moment. You don't have to be a nodding dog. I am not a nodding dog, as you've probably gathered from our interactions. So yeah, you know, challenge the system, but do it in a way where you're educated, where you're credible, where you know your stuff, you know your stats, you know you've done your learning around it and you continue to do your learning. But don't be fearful of them. Be challenging and stand up and let your voice be heard and be counted.
So I would say, as a counter argument to that, playing devil's advocate, I don't believe that the judges or anybody in the system is going to listen to somebody who is disenfranchised and doesn't have 4 degrees behind them or a legal degree or anything to say that the system is wrong. What would you say to somebody who's thinking that way?
Yeah, I don't think every judge is. I don't even probably think half of the judges are. But there's a creeping percentage, like I just said to you about that interaction with the ex-prisoner. There's a creeping percentage because the walls are coming down a little bit, and there just is more mixing there. You know, I've seen it. I don't know how I ended up there, but I ended up in the House of Lords, hobnobbing with all sorts of people, and I'm just a brummy girl, you know, an ex-prisoner, ex-lap dancer, you know, feeling a little bit low in self-esteem in those circles, but actually coming out of there knowing that I've got as much to say as the next person, and I think I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that everyone's ready to listen to you, that you're not going to get any doors slammed in your face. I think I still have people look at me sometimes like, you know, you're just an ex-prisoner. Who cares? Who cares what you've got to say? And that's all right. You know, you can't change everybody's mind. You can't make every racist see that they're a racist and there's a better way to be. But you might change one person's mind, and then the ripple effects of that could be exponential in terms of the impact that that one person changing their perspective just slightly because of something that you've had to say has in the world and in the world of criminal justice. You know, one judge's mindset changing because they've spoken to somebody who's got a real valid point and a wealth of experiences has unknown positive consequences. So yeah, I don't think we're saying that everything's good. I think it's the opposite. I think everything's pretty bad and pretty sad at the moment. But yeah, there's always opportunities, and you have to fight for those opportunities. But do fight for those opportunities, and get support when you need it. Get mentors that have been there and have kind of walked that path, and learn from them. I think the reason I do this work and stand up in numerous rooms now and can talk confidently is because I saw a woman that I was in prison with doing exactly that, holding a room full of decision makers, probation chiefs and bosses, and it was like, wow, if she can do it, so can I. And that's what I want to say to anyone who's listening, really. If I can do it, so can you. And yeah, do it. Do it. They might not all listen, but just do it anyway. Do it because you can.
It's really, really good advice. And yeah, really motivational. So a personal question. So I'm just about to finish my master's degree in the sort of next year. Right. And I wanted to go into things like policy making. And I want to do what you're doing. It's just making an active difference, and knowing that policy making is a space where this stuff happens with decision makers. So what do you think is the best way to get experience and understanding of the system behind the systems? The people that are running the prisons, the people that are making all of these decisions.
Yeah, so I think it starts with the lived experience, the passion, the knowledge that things need to change. I think that's an impetus for many of us that are probably tuned in. But for me, the lived experience wasn't quite enough to get into the circles and to make the changes that I knew needed to be changed. So then it was like you're doing, it was educating myself. The same month that I started New Leaf, I started my degree at Warwick, thinking that my business would fail, but at least I'd have some, just being clever, really. Clever as in covering all the possibilities of failure. But actually neither failed, and what it gave me was a real knowledge base on my sector. So I did all of my assignments on the criminal justice system because I was passionate about it. So I think pick something that you're passionate about learn about it, immerse yourself in it, because like I said about the world of academia, it's ready for you now. They're open to it. They're a lot more supportive in terms of subsidising costs of courses and things. I got a lot of help being a single mum, and being on benefits at the time. I managed to tap into some subsidised funding to help me with my degree, and I managed to get a first. So if I can do it, like I said, what you can too. And then probably immerse yourself in the practical world of it as well. So yeah, volunteer, get involved with a cause that's close to your heart, whether that be youth leadership or BLM, whatever your kind of passion is. Get involved with a voluntary organisation and work your way up, learn the lingo, make yourself credible both in your mind but also on the ground and on the streets, because I think, going back to how we first opened this conversation, is I don't speak for every prisoner. I definitely don't speak for every female prisoner. I'm white. I wasn't a mum at the time, so I didn't have to miss my children. There's lots of experiences that I can't speak for because it wasn't part of my own journey. But I can speak to my community, and they'll speak to me because they know that I'm not judging them and that I've been there and done it and I'm one of them. So, I think it's around creating a platform for yourself, but then also taking other people with you, do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think it was Nelson Mandela said one of my favourite quotes, and it was like, to be free isn't just to cast off your own chains, it's to kind of support the freedom of others, and that's what I think our job is to do as policymakers. It's not just to kind of stand there like the ego and it all be about me and my experience. It's actually for me to use my platform to give others a voice and to help them be heard with all of their experiences. That's kind of my responsibility.
That's a really, really nice message to end this podcast on, I think. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your experiences and all of your wisdom. Like, it's such abundant wisdom.
I don't know about wisdom, but I've enjoyed it. You've definitely.
Well, at least I'm going to take up on it because it was really good wisdom, and I've got a few things to Google. So if people want to know more about you and your company, where can they find you and get in touch?
The website's pretty snazzy at the moment. We've just had it all redone, so you can find us at www.newleafcic.org. That tells you everything about our different projects and what we do. You can also find me on Twitter at newleafcic. We've got a Facebook page, or you can just pop into the office and come and say hello. We're in Digbeth at 9 Alcock Street. So yeah, we're always happy to kind of offer a bit of support, even if it's just via phone. You can find my phone number on the website. Even if you just want a bit of advice about how to go about something, just pick up the phone and I'll help wherever I can and tap you into our networks, and see you around those tables, hopefully.
Do you have opportunities for volunteers and young people who aren't necessarily sort of in the offending system but want to get involved?
So usually I'd say yes, but we've just recruited a load of people with adults with lived experience. So at the moment we've only got a small space, and with COVID, I'm having to turn people down, unfortunately, that want to volunteer for us. But having said that, I can always, help you to find other organisations that maybe are taking people on, or, start a project within New Leaf where we look at, focus on youth justice and maybe train some peer mentors that can support younger people, because we tend to focus on 18 plus, but, we know that people start hitting issues in their early and mid-teens. So, I'm open to anything really. I don't like to say no to anything, but at the moment we're pretty flat out just trying to survive COVID-19 and all its dramas.
Yeah, no, we are too, and we're working as hard as we can to make sure that we can get like conversations like this out there and for people to start listening. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our listeners. Don't forget to follow us at OnPointWM, and we'll be back next time for more conversations that matter to you.
Don't forget to follow us on social media at OnPointWM and #ThriveCasters. Join us next time for more conversations that matter to you.